Okay, people, this is an interesting and rather exceptional podcast we have coming up. I just want to give a disclaimer. There will be some potential triggers in here. We'll be talking about suicide, suicidal ideation, and also some aspects of the supernatural. So if any of these three things are trigger points, please switch off now. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Live Free, Ride Free. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horse Boy and The Long Ride Home. Before I jump in with today's guest, I want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do here, please give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really, really helps us to make the progress. To find out about our certification courses, online video libraries, books, and other courses, please go to rupertisaacson.com. So now let's jump in. Welcome back to Live Free, Ride Free, where we talk to people who have lived and are living self-actualized lives of all kinds. And what can we learn from them? Today, Emelie Cajsdotter. You're going to think I'm nuts. Emelie doesn't just talk to animals. She talks to the stones, the mountains, the trees, the lot. And those of you who know me will know that I'm actually quite skeptical of this, because in the work that I do with horses and with autism, I get a lot of people coming and saying, oh, I'm an animal communicator and blah, blah, blah. And usually my bullshit meter goes beep, 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 beep. And the reason it does that is because frequently the reports of what the animals are saying or whatever is often somehow negative towards the humans or something. And in my time with the Bushmen, the Sun in the Kalahari, where there's a lot of direct animal communication going on, those kinds of things are never the message. They're always much more within the animal's sphere of reference, of which we are peripheral, not central. And so this idea that, well, my rider doesn't ride me well enough or something like that just always struck me as sort of one human to another human, sort of using the horse as a way to criticize another human, basically. But the fact is that communication with nature is a real thing and has been a real thing ever since humanity has been here, because guess what? We're part of nature. And if you've spent any time with hunting and gathering people, some of you listening have, you will know that the way in which they communicate with the environment around them, animate and inanimate, appears supernatural. However, they would posit, and I think I would posit, having spent a lot of time with them, that it's not supernatural, it's natural. It's just that it's happening on a level that we have forgotten, lost the need for, become deaf to, etc., in post-agricultural society. So anyway, that was a long preamble to say that Emelie is one of the few people I've met who seems to have an unbroken connection despite being within our society. And I find this fascinating, and I want her to talk to us about it. So, and how really this has defined her life and her livelihood and everything. So Emelie, welcome. I hope I did you justice. Tell us who you are, what you do.
Thank you for having me here. And as you and I know, but maybe the listeners do not, is that you helped me a great deal by saying that this way of relating to your surroundings, which I have recently just given the concept name Empathic Interbeing, that is a natural state for a human being. So maybe I'm not the weirdo after all. And that was both very devastating for my ego and helpful for myself.
Oh, sorry. I'll try to stroke your ego.
No. Now, once we got it crashed, please don't put it together again. Yes, it's hard to know where to begin an answer to that question. But
start at the beginning. Okay, I forgot to say that you're in Sweden. You're in a very natural place in Western Sweden. But take us back to your beginning, because I know that you were not always raised in nature.
No.
You know, how did this evolve for you? To start as a small girl, and just take us on the journey, please.
I think when people see the work I do today, which is living in nature, working with biodiversity, communicating with all sorts of living entities, it's easy to think that I grew up in the countryside in very sort of loving and caring environment, but it was the opposite. I don't mean to blame anyone by saying that it wasn't loving and caring. It was a great destructive mess, as I think
Why was
our civilization in many places are. My father, I grew up in a high-rise building in the outskirts of Gothenburg in Sweden. One of these high-rise building with sort of 10 floors and several doors in, and I had a key around my neck because there weren't really very many adults around. And it was this sort of concrete jungle type environment. And my father, who most likely today would have been given some sort of diagnosis within the autistic spectrum, was a researcher in abstract mathematics. And that he could do. He was apparently very, very intelligent in that narrow field. And he lived his life on that very fine line. That fine line didn't include any social skills, any capacity to at all interact with his surroundings, including me. And he died when I was 5 in what was most likely suicide. He had asthma and he mixed his asthma medicines so that he suffocated and died. And I was 5 at the time and I was with him when that happened. So I would say that that had a huge impact on me and still do. It's like there are things that you sort of get over and that there are things that you learn to integrate in your being. And I would say that that would be one of those.
Does that mean you actually watched him die?
Yes, I watched him die.
Please, if it's all right, take us through that, because that could mean so many things. Can you be as clear as you can be what happened?
Well, I was 5, and people tend to think that children are very unaware of what happens around them, especially in a younger age. And I have very clear memories from a very young age, and maybe because those are my links to my ancestral memories, and maybe my being would be more alert to really collect them, somehow knowing that he would pass. This was not the only complication. My mother was not really equipped for the role of having children, and she knew that. She knew that this was really not at all doable for her for various reasons. But she grew up in a generation where having a husband and children is what you do. So it was what it was. She couldn't really at all deal with having children. So, and since my father was also incapable of any kind of care, it was my mother's mother, that grandmother, that would basically raise me, and she was a psychic healer. So this is the this is the little pool.
Just quickly, you were an only child?
Yes, I think maybe, I mean, as much inspiration I got from this upbringing, it might also be a good thing that there weren't a lot of kids in this situation.
Right. And then the second thing, this grandmother, your mother's mother, also in the tower block there in
another high-rise building. Actually, not in the beginning, but after my father died and she realized that this is all going to go to pot, she moved to another high-rise building.
Where was she before that? Was she more in the country or?
No, she was in the middle of the city as well. Her dream was always to become a mathematician. She was also highly intelligent in that measurable way that makes sense for mathematics.
Well, all these people working for Saab, I know that Gothenburg.
No, none of them were.
Center for the Saab.
My father was working in the university, and my mother was working in the university too, because she has this whatever unusual skill with languages. So she speaks 7 languages. And
your mother?
Yes, they all have like racing heads.
Is your mother still around?
Yes.
Okay.
And so did my grandmother, but my grandmother, being born sort of, well, more than 100 years ago, she was never allowed to pursue in any studies of that kind.
And when you say
So,
she was a psychic healer, sorry, there's a journalist in me. I've got to piece all
yeah,
the puzzle pieces together first before we. Um, Psychic healer. How did you know? How did she know? And in that urban
that's a million
context,
dollar question. She was very good at looking into people's future. And I didn't really like that
she
because
would do that as a party trick. She'd do that for a living. She'd
no,
do that.
people came to ask her for help and she never charged money. She had some other day
And
job.
how did that evolve? How did it evolve? That did she go around saying, "Oh, and by the way,
Well, no, people
you're going to
just,
blow your nose next Tuesday week," or like, how did people find out? And how
I
did
don't know because I was so young, but
yeah.
they just knew and they just
People were around coming to her?
yes, they would come to her and
You
I
never asked. She never told how it evolved.
no, actually I never really thought of it until you ask now, to be honest. Anyway, she
Welcome to
would be
Journalist
very good
Island.
at that's brilliant. No, she would see people's future, and I found that a bit uncomfortable because it raised the question in me whether there actually is a set destiny or not, and I didn't really like that.
Mm.
So I didn't want her to see anything about me. She said a few things anyway because she just couldn't stop herself, and so far she's been correct. But she also believed in all sorts of guardian angels, reincarnation, all of these things.
Do you know how she evolved these beliefs?
No,
Okay, because it doesn't sound like it was in the family culture. So the family culture
no.
was very cerebral and very intellectual.
Yes, I have no idea where that comes from.
You're
The
religious.
interesting thing is that on my father's side, his sister has almost the same qualities, and nobody knows where that comes from either.
Okay.
So,
Strange northern people.
yeah, yes. And she was such a good healer that if I was at home and she was at home and I had a headache because I had migraines for as long as I can remember, and I would have a migraine coming on, I would call her and she would just do something that I wouldn't know over the phone and the headache would go. And to me that was always normal. And and when I started to have experiences myself and being confused and scared and overwhelmed, I would tell her, logically, she would be the one to tell, and she would always tell me that it's normal. She never made a big deal out of it. She never made me feel special, and she never made me feel wrong. So thinking about it afterwards, I think that approach of this is fine, this is normal, was very helpful in whatever happened later.
And she never told you, or you never asked, where does this come from, Granny? You know,
No,
how, okay, okay.
no, it just
It's
felt
there.
natural and normal.
Okay.
And before my father died, he went to her and asked her if she could look after me. And she saw him dying. She told me that years later. She saw him dying and didn't want to believe it.
Mm.
But she didn't want to upset him. So she said, yes, of course I will. And then he died. So she would be my sort of human contact. But I think she taught me so many things. And maybe one of the most important things she taught me, because she later ended up committing suicide as well, but then I was 17 years old, is that there is nothing black and white in this life.
Mm.
It's not that, how could she teach me all the things that has proven to be so helpful throughout my life and still not being able to live with herself? How is that possible? And how can my father, who I felt some strange bond to, although he could never show emotions in the usual way, he could definitely radiate love. How could he kill himself? And I come to this soothing, free conclusion after dealing with this for years, is that because all of it is possible at the same time. It's, yes, my grandmother could teach me all these things, and she still couldn't live with herself, and both are true. And although they are completely contradictory, they can definitely coexist within the same human being, and it doesn't affect my love for her or for any other of my highly destructive family members.
Let's just go back to, I want to delve into in a moment what you think the motives, because I suspect the motives for each of them to take their own lives were probably a little different. And I think this is a worthwhile topic to explore for the reasons that you just mentioned, in that many things can exist simultaneously, including timelines.
Yes.
Yeah. Having again spent a lot of time with Indigenous people,
Yes. And I
I've
think
learned.
for a modern civilized human being, you could say that this was a harsh learning curve.
Yes, for
But
sure.
but
As a small
maybe
child, because you also rely on your parents to.
maybe that's what it takes to break down this linear mind.
Right, right. And linear, I think, is the word there,
Yeah.
because if one thinks of time as vertical, which
Mm.
Indigenous people tend to, that as far as I've been aware, then as you say, things are happening simultaneously, past, present, and future. We think of it obviously very much as linear, and are brought up to think that way. And of course, it's comforting. I feel more, and I'm all about comfort. I think comfort is good, to think of it as vertical. But let's just go back to. I just want to now dial us back to your father.
Yes, yes.
You are you say you were you in the room with him when he died? Like, did you see him die?
Well, I saw him almost die, which also is a storyline. He had taken those medications, he mixed these medications, and later I was told that he'd mixed them several times before and ended up in hospital.
Mm.
So I understand that he, to some extent, knew what he was doing. And this was between Christmas and New Year's. And I remember that Christmas, I was clinging on to him in a way that I would never do, because he wasn't physically accessible as a father. You couldn't sit on his lap, you couldn't hug him. He didn't, that's not how you interacted with him. But and for me that was fine. But on that Christmas, I remember like really grasping him, like holding on to legs and arms and clothes and whatever. So somehow I knew, and he knew that there is a parting coming. And when it actually happened, he was sitting on the bed in the bedroom looking out through the window. And outside of these windows in this flat, we were on the third floor, were this amazing old, tall, although we were in the city, beech trees, like huge, very dark stems. And it took me many years to fully understand how present they were. It's like, yeah, you think you're alone and you're vulnerable and very exposed. You are when you're a kid and everything is falling apart. But those trees, they were there and they helped much more than I was aware of at the time. So they were also there. So he's looking out of the window at the trees, and so am I. He's not looking at me. We're not having any contact. And I understand that he can't breathe and he's about to fall. So he collapses on the floor. So I see him collapse on the floor. And I think that he is still in his body as that happens. And sometime around that time, the neighbors comes and they take me out, and they say that, oh, he only has difficulty swallowing. I know that he's dying. But I think the fact that I, at that point in time, didn't see his spirit leaving left me in a state of something that later turned into quite an extreme workaholic personality, where I spent many years trying to save and rescue I don't know how many individuals and animals, mainly. I mean, we have a sanctuary here. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but in adult years, I understood that within me, he wasn't really fully dead. It took me years to accept that he was. So every time I got a chance to save someone, there was hope for him. And every time I couldn't, I had to face this bottomless pain of accepting that he's gone. So you could say that that story went on past that point, although after his death, quite shortly after, I could see him sitting in the living room, always in a yellow pajamas. I have no idea why he would always have those clothes on, but and I could talk to him. And I realized that he is dead, but he's visible to me. Sometimes I can't control it. I can't ask him to come, but sometimes he comes. And you mentioned the reason for him choosing to die, and I think he answered that in one of those early meeting points. Then I went on into my own
You
self-destructiveness.
can't go on. You've got to tell us what that is. You can't drop
Yes.
that and leave it.
No. I'm gonna go. But what he said is that the difference between you and me is the words. And what I understand from that sentence is that, yes, I also live a life that is quite a thin thread that goes far out from what's normal. But I have a way to reconnect to the common world of fellow human beings, which is through the words. And he didn't. He left a box of equations that no one could solve. He never expressed himself except that one time after death.
Do you think he left because he found it too painful to be here? Do you think he left because he felt he could do his work better from another place? Do you think it was an act of, was it an act of distress, him taking his life, or was it an act of logical creativity to sort of go to the next professional phase or something? What do you...
I always felt it was more on the desperate side.
Okay. What was it that he found so painful, do you think? Because if he had the job in the university and he could exist in that mathematical world, okay, you know,
And
had to
he had been offered a job at Stanford University too, so he could have gone deeper and probably met more people that wouldn't find him so odd. But he chose not to, which is unexplainable. But I think what I continued to explore after this, and still do, is the isolation of modern humans. I think there is a specific pain in isolation that may not be like emotional heartbreak type of pain or anxiety pain or those things that we can phrase, but another overwhelming pain that is both inside and outside, and might be the reason why we feed ourselves so much stimuli and why we are so costly for this planet. And I think for him, that isolation was very obvious. And maybe the things that more so-called normal people would do to soothe that pain didn't work for him.
Do you think in another, perhaps more authentic human context, he'd have been all right? And if so, what would that context have been and what would his role have been, do you think?
Well, I think when I live with animals, any other species, I notice that when you remove the filter of linear thinking, you also remove hierarchy. And when you remove hierarchy based on values, everyone seems to have a unique role that is unmeasurable in value and uncomparable with anyone else. And what I also notice is an obvious acceptance that you're not meant to be anything else. That would be stupid, to be honest. So it seems like everyone else, except the modern human linear society, is making maximum use of individual capacity one way or another, which means that you don't have to do things that you're not meant to or that you're not cut out to be able to. which means that if he lived in a herd of horses, he could probably have spent his whole life diving into this far, far, far away place of abstract mathematics, and someone else would make sure that the wolves don't eat him, or that they do get to the water place, and that he does get to sleep sometimes. Things that he could never really do for himself as a human being would maybe in a different society be okay, because it would fit somebody else's unique role.
I guess, right. My
These
question there, though, is that he was clearly valued, right? He had a job at the university, so people saw the value of his mathematical brilliance.
But I think it's in the possibility to relate to others.
Okay. Right, so that the professional context not being enough, even if you're surrounded by your fellow nerds.
Yeah. Yes. And if you look at, so I think we've all along been looking for the same thing, but my approach is completely different. I think when I would try to explain any of what empathic interbeing would be, it's not being psychic, it's not reading something, it's not interpreting someone. It is, for a moment, fully, with all senses, experience the other one's reality from within. And that can only happen if I'm available to the same extent for the other one.
Feeling gotten.
Yeah.
Yeah, feeling seen.
Yes. So I exist in you and you exist in me. And I think that is probably our original context. And when we lose that, we begin to experience some sort of alienation that is harder for some than others. But I would say that a lot of states of being that is normal in modern human life is maybe a symptom of lack of empathic interbeing and not normal at all. I've heard you talk sometimes, and you seem to often mention that joy is a natural state. I would agree, and so would every other species that I've met so far.
Yeah.
So why do we have so little joy? And why does it disappear in such an early? Why do we stop playing earlier?
We do. I think we're told to. I think we're conditioned.
Yeah.
But in our natural state, I don't think we do.
No. So there are lots of things that we take for granted as a normal maturing of a human being that might not be at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I put away childish things. I'm like, fuck that. I mean, really, honestly. I'm just thinking, as you know, I'm just imagining, I'm projecting in my imagination your father as being, say, in the Kalahari, or, you know, East Africa, or Paleolithic, even Neolithic Europe, you know, and I'm imagining him organizing the construction of a stone circle.
Exactly.
You know,
Perfect.
and so those are my questions. You know, it's like, okay, who built those ancient observatories that now we realize go back way further than we thought they did? You know, with the new findings that Göbekli Tepe and earlier archaeological things that are now rewriting the whole human history thing from when I was an archaeologist and historian at university, which was, you know, it starts with the Sumerians 6,000 years ago. To Göbekli Tepe, they now know is 6,000 years older than that, and they just found another one close, and there's this new one in Indonesia that's older, and these were being organized by people. And you could say, well, yeah, he was doing that at the university in Gothenburg, yeah, but not in a way, but in a way that was isolated. Okay, you must sit here in this department of mathematics or this department of physics at the end of this corridor in a box, and now do your equations, put them in a box.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than observe the heavens, show us how to observe the heavens.
Exactly.
Be our mad, beautiful druid who emanates love. Yes, we will absolutely make sure that there's venison for you, because we need to understand why that strange light in the sky is coming. We need you to make those
Yeah,
calculations for us, please. And we realize that that's going to take you, 5 months of just sort of more or less sitting in your hut while we bring you things. And we're going to work on healing you, and we're going to love you,
exactly.
and let you be.
That would have worked, is
That would
my.
have worked. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get it. I get it. I get it. Because, he must have had a great joy. Like, I could imagine when he was in flow and he was in the zone with
Oh
his,
yes, when he was
he must have had joy.
flow, he would gallop around in the living room and jump up and down and make little noises, which was hilarious to watch as a kid.
Right.
So he did express himself, but not the way you would expect an adult man of his age to.
Right. So he was playing among the fractals and the
Yes.
Fibonacci frequencies and the beauty of creation,
Yeah.
but unable to.
Gallop on the spot like a horse, for example,
Fantastic.
if you found something.
Autistic behaviors. Yeah, no, amazing. Okay, okay. So he leaves. You
Hmm.
are there when that happens. You're 5.
Yeah.
Let's go on from there.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you might think that lots of things happened after, but I would say that a lot of things also happened before. And I know that they happened before because this is such a cut in my timeline. So I know how old I am depending on if he's alive or not. So I know that before the age of 5, I have this obsessive, I would call it obsessive fascination with the end of consciousness. So my thought that I can't let go of, to the point of having panic attacks and not being able to sleep, is the universe expanding or not? This is what I think about constantly, but I can't really phrase it because I'm too young. But this is on.
Why would that have mattered to you?
I have no idea, but it did. I mean, it was a matter of life and death. I could not stop thinking about it, and I still find it fascinating.
Well, your dad, did you ask those adults around you? Because they seem to have been the people who would have also thought of such questions.
Yes, maybe we did discuss some of it. I don't know, but what I do remember is this constant thought, and finally coming to the conclusion that maybe the universe is expanding. I think I came to that conclusion because that was the easier for my mind. So if it was expanding, it would have an edge, because otherwise there wouldn't be a sort of something that would expand. And if you come to the edge, how can you get past the edge and remain aware of that happening? How can you cross the boundary into what is non-existent and still exist beyond it? And then I would go to that point, and then I would sit and tell myself the word eternity, 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 until I got so dizzy and would hyperventilate and panic. And then I had this pile of Donald Duck magazines, because I learned to read when I was really young, sort of instant. Yeah. And I would turn on the light, look at Donald Duck. For some reason, Donald Duck, my mind would calm down and understand exactly what I was looking at. Then I would close the lamp and I would start all over again. And I would have nightmares and scream and cry. But I could not. I was so drawn to that sort of far end of what was still accessible to my mind.
Mm.
And I'm still extremely fascinated of what happens when we expand ourselves beyond what is possible for the mind. I still find that very fascinating, but maybe not to this, or maybe I still do get anxiety from it. I don't know actually, but I did when I was young. So that was before he died. You would think that you would have all these existential thoughts because you experience death, but that started before.
Okay, so you're dealing with the idea of the limits of consciousness very, very young. Then your father does die. Can you take us through the rest of your childhood? Now go into your childhood, into adolescence. Take us on that journey.
After my father died, I had a real fear. I mean, existential anxiety is something because you choose it somehow, but this was real fear because I knew that I was left with my mother, whom I was terrified of, because she really had these temper tantrums and fits that was completely unpredictable.
Yeah.
So I was really, really afraid of being home, of going home alone. And because I grew up in this neighborhood where it was this sort of high-rise buildings is usually for people who for some reason don't have a lot of money or they have other issues. So there would be quite a lot of alcoholics and drug addicts and other broken families.
Even though your dad had a good job at the university and stuff.
Yeah.
Could he have afforded something different, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
Interesting questions.
Because, yeah, you associate university professors with living in nicer neighborhoods and things.
Yeah.
Okay. That was never explained to you.
Well.
Okay. But, okay, you're in a slightly depressed neighborhood and?
Yes, which means that there are lots of other kids with broken homes.
Yeah.
And we find each other and form some sort of family of our own. So that I would say was quite helpful. And I could explain to them that I don't dare to go home by myself. My mother threatened to kill herself. And because to me that was a real threat, it could happen.
Yeah.
I didn't want to find her dead. So I made sure I always had a friend coming with me if I was going home after school.
Okay.
And from the age of 7, I started to ride in a riding school.
Why? How did that happen?
I just wanted to be near animals. I always wanted to be near animals. But
why riding? Why ponies? Why horses? Why not dogs?
I didn't really care about riding. It was just a pull.
Okay. And who organized that for you?
I think it was my grandmother.
Okay.
She was behind a lot of those sort of...
it doesn't sound like a decision your mum would have made at that point.
Well, no.
Yeah.
And because we're in the city and the stable is in the city, so I cycle there. So I cycle to the stable almost every day. And I'm with a friend in another high-rise building. And her mother is working as... she doesn't know who her father is. So she lives alone with her mother. And her mother is a waitress in a bar that at that time started to have drag shows. And this was new in the time.
Hey.
And I still love drag shows after that.
How can you not?
Yes.
Who doesn't love a good drag show?
Much of everything, right?
Yeah.
But anyway,
joy, yeah. As you know, if you followed any of my work, I'm an autism dad. And we have a whole career before this podcast in helping people with neurodivergence, either who are professionals in the field. Are you a therapist? Are you a caregiver? Are you a parent? Or are you somebody with neurodivergence? When my son, Rowan, was diagnosed with autism in 2004, I really didn't know what to do. So I reached out for mentorship, and I found it through an amazing adult autistic woman who's very famous, Dr. Temple Grandin. And she told me what to do. And it's been working so amazingly for the last 20 years that not only is my son basically independent, but we've helped countless thousands of others reach the same goal, working in schools, working at home, working in therapy settings. If you would like to learn this cutting-edge neuroscience-backed approach, it's called Movement Method. You can learn it online. You can learn it very, very simply. It's almost laughably simple. The important thing is to begin. Let yourself be mentored as I was by Dr. Grandin and see what results can follow. Go to this website, newtrailslearning.com. Sign up as a gold member. Take the online Movement Method course. It's in 40 countries. Let us know how it goes for you. We really want to know. We really want to help people like me, people like you out there live their best life, to live free, ride free, see what happens.
Since I couldn't really go home most of the time, and she didn't have a father, and she was working nights, my friend's mother would take both my friend and me with her to her work. So we would hide behind these huge velvet curtains and look at these big guys when they were putting on loose tits and makeup and glittery dresses. And I love that. I still love the feeling of sort of, because we knew that we were a bit too young to be there.
Shape shifting and role play. Interesting. Yes. That shamanic process of transformation.
And I loved it. And there was something in there, and they were happy and they were friendly and sort of courageous in their own way.
Yeah, non-judgmental, absolutely supportive of each other.
It was amazing. I didn't know that world existed.
How old are you now at this point?
I'm probably like 7, 8, 9 years old.
Okay.
That sort of thing.
You found you're cycling to when you're not going to drag shows and school. You're
yes, drag shows and riding school.
brings drag hunting, the idea of drag hunting, John. Yeah. And you are exposed to the ponies at this point. Are you talking to them? Are they talking to you, or does this come later?
This begins. Do you
remember the first time?
Yes, definitely.
Please tell us.
Yes. This is a riding school that is an image of civilization. This is in the middle of the city. All the horses are tied up in stalls. There are almost no fields. They're in a very traditional regime. This riding school has changed now to something totally different, but back then, a regime that is based on obedience.
Yeah.
Like, you do as you're told, or you will be sold or killed.
Yeah.
And the horses that come, naturally, they come to this riding school with quite a lot of energy or vital force, although a lot of them come through horse tradesmen, and they've had a troublesome past before well, you know how it is.
I do.
And then they get broken down quite quickly. You see how they start with this natural playfulness, taking initiative, making contact, all of these things. And you see that fall off them as they stay on this riding school. And then eventually they will develop some sort of physical lameness or other issue, or they will become really aggressive, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
This was the situation. And so one day this pony comes to this riding school, and she's small pony, a chestnut mare, really, really aggressive. And in the world of linear hierarchy, it's very important who's the boss. The whole idea is about that. So a horse that makes you frightened needs to know who's boss, basically. So to deal with her aggression, she's met with more aggression.
Sure.
And usually that will make one part give up. And usually that part is the horse, because they have a very bad starting point, because they were in the slave trade to begin with. So, but this pony doesn't give up. She attacks back, and she really attacks back. And if people keep beating her to the point that she's not attacking back anymore, she just freezes and waits. She never submits. She never shows any sign of submission. So then people start to, and this is the riding school teachers, they start to try to give her sweets. This is around the time when horses were given sugar cubes. So they would put out their hands and give her sugar cubes, and she would bite the hand, refuse the sugar cube, making a statement of that and leaving. So this horse begins to really fascinate me. Because for me, yes, I do have a good time at the drag shows, and I love being with my friends. But inside this, I'm breaking. Because I'm terrified of my mother, I'm terrified of being home. I feel no sense of value whatsoever. I have this unnameable grief over my father that I can't understand or phrase. I anyway have all these existential thoughts that can't stop, because my mind is racing just like on all my ancestry lines. So it's very hard to be me. So I'm beginning to, I would say, lose myself at this time. Mm-hmm. And I also begin to feel that maybe dying is the only way out. Because I know that dying is a way out. It's present.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not really afraid of that. As much as I have no bloody clue how to live in this society. So when I see this pony, who obviously is impossible to break down, it makes me very curious. What is her strength? What is her motivation? Why is she? Because for most of us, it's like the lack of punishment becomes the reward. Is the
Is
choice?
she all right with a child on her back? Like, does she?
She throws them off.
She throws them off. Okay, so and because that was going to be my question too about some of these ponies that come. Okay, they're not having a nice time in the riding school, but do they enjoy to some degree the relationship with the children that come?
I'm sure some do. I mean, some horses that I meet in riding schools now, and I definitely would say that there are riding schools doing a fabulous job of merging these worlds.
Yeah.
And when I meet riding school horses that are really content in the setting they're in, I would say they always describe that they have this group of students that they really relate to, and they feel that they totally matter in how these individuals evolve.
Right.
Would
They're
be very
partners.
similar
Exactly.
to
They're
what
generous.
I've heard. Yeah. They're
Okay,
generous.
but this is not the case with this pony.
No. And this is not the case the way that place is being run at that time.
So you become fascinated with this pony.
Oh,
What then?
I became fascinated because what is it that she has that nobody else have?
Mm-hmm.
Why is she not breaking down? And how can she be so courageous?
Mm-hmm.
Because she knows that she's going to be bitten and treated horribly, but somehow for her, it's worth it rather than losing herself.
Mm-hmm.
So why does she pick this fight?
Mm-hmm.
So I go down to her stable and I don't dare to go in because they're tied in stalls. And what she does is that she looks at these people with her ears forward, and then when they go in, she kicks them into the wall and don't let them out. And sometimes she bites people's stomachs and she don't let go. And I've seen that happen, and they sort of scream, and many people have to go in and take them out, and it's quite terrifying. So I don't dare to go in, but I'm totally fascinated. And I think that this original genuine fascination without an agenda might be one of the keys to what's going to happen next. Because basically my question to her is, who are you? It's not, can you please change? Why are you doing this? Why can't you behave? It's, I really want to know who she is. And now when the horses here, years later, have started a school in Empathic Interbeing for humans, this is the question that we work with the most. The curiosity to really meet the essence of another living being without any other want. Not because I want something of you, not because I want it to lead to anywhere, just because I want to be where you are somehow. So this is what I feel when I stand outside of her stable. And then something happens that I would say is grace. And maybe because I was so ready to give up. I mean, I wanted to die anyway. So I don't really have a lot to lose in having my image of the world torn down, as I probably would have if I was in a really good place. Because what happens is that this invisible plexiglass wall that is usually between each one of us in this type of society, meaning that I can see you and I can relate to you, I can hear what you're saying, and I can, to some extent, through my biological design, also I do have mirror neurons. So if you were sad, I would be sad. But I wouldn't know what it's like to be you. It would always be how I feel when something happens to you and how I interpret what happens to me when something happens to you, right? In this case, this wall is taken off. So instantly and without any warning or preparation, I know exactly how it is to be her. It doesn't mean that I forget that I'm also Emelie. I know that I'm standing on the stable floor and observing her, but so I know what is me and I know what is her, but all of a sudden I'm in her and I'm also in her observing me. So it's like, I do feel exactly how it is to be her, but she also feels exactly how it is to be me. And all of these things are happening simultaneously without any stress of comprehending all of that at the same time. But what I do find, and I'm 11 at this time, what is frightening to me is that all of a sudden, my entire foundation of how I've built my way of looking at reality is gone. It literally feels like someone pulls the carpet and you're standing on a completely different floor. And what is inside of her is this intense sadness and feeling of being completely misunderstood. And regardless of how high you scream and how strongly you express yourself, no one hears you. It's like screaming inside of, one of those little boxes that is soundproof, so nothing comes out. And that sense of extreme powerlessness was really overwhelming to me. Now, when her feeling of extreme powerlessness hits me, it hits me in a spot where I am forced to see myself. Because if I'm completely experiencing you, I also have to have this complete honesty in experiencing me, because now I'm being seen with the same eyes from the other one. So I'm also faced with my own inner state unmasked. My own desperation, feeling of never fitting in, not knowing how to live this life, all of this is coming crashing in at exactly the same time. And I realized what is what. You would think that there is a merging, but it isn't, because that would be a projection, and this is not. So, and then she has this image of a big barn type building, and I would never know if this building existed for real or if it is symbolic. I can't tell. But there is an image of a barn and a low wooden door. I would say that any old Swedish wooden barn could look a bit like that. And in this image, she is being forced to go in through this small narrow door with some sort of whip or cane, or there is something long and narrow. And the feeling is to refuse to go into something that will diminish you. And I'll never forget that feeling for as long as I live, I think. Which answered my question, who are you? Why are you so strong? Well, this is her strength. She refuses to adapt herself to a destructive circumstance, and she never did.
What happened to her in the end?
What happened to her in the end was that she got COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and was going to be put down. My grandmother realized that if this pony dies, maybe so will my granddaughter. So,
Okay, so you build a relationship with this pony.
yes, because after this event, this happened, I don't know for how long this went on. Probably not very long in linear time, is my guess. Not that anyone on the outside would notice. You would just see a girl standing in a stable and a horse eating hay, right? And it's completely life-altering forever. And I realized that there is another way. I realized that there is a way out of this isolation.
You go and tell your grandmother this?
Yes.
Immediately?
Not immediately, I think, but at some point.
Soonish.
Yes.
Say, hey, Granny, I've had this kind of...
Yes, and then yeah, and she,
like this. Okay.
Exactly. And then she would say, oh, well, that's normal, and continue with whatever she's doing.
Yeah.
Usually what motors...
So the horse develops a chronic ailment. It's heading for a bullet job.
Yes. I become her groom. You know how it is in riding schools.
Yes.
I realized that this pony holds a key, and in my...
Presumably she doesn't pin you against the wall and rip your guts out.
She does.
She does?
Yes, she does.
Every time?
Yeah, almost. This is also an interesting part. An important part.
How do you survive?
Lots of bruises. I feel that she holds the key out of this reality So I can't let go of her. I understand that what she shows me is that that key is equally in me as it is in her. But with my linear mind, I need her to not lose myself is my beginning point. So I cling on to this pony. And the way to do that is to be her groom. She hates being groomed.
Okay.
And I hang on to her like a drowning man to this sort of life vest. And she begins to test me. And I think that from a linear perspective, we tend to see testing as a power game. Like you test someone until you know who's boss and then that's sorted. But what if the test is about who are you? Do you know at all what you're made of? What if that is the test? And it's not about power at all, because if we remove the hierarchy, it's good for everyone, like literally everyone on the planet, that I am the sort of utmost honest, complete version of myself, because that is my gift to this life. And I'm broken and I want to die and I'm terrified of everything and I'm not in a good state. So this pony doesn't want to be groomed. She doesn't want me to cling on for emotional support. She can't give any of that. She knows that I have to find that in me. So she brings me to this difficult test where most people sell their horses, which is the test of endurance. It's like, okay, so now you had a glimpse of what's possible. Are you prepared to do the work? So am I trustworthy to her? Am I trustworthy to myself? How do I deal with fear? All of these things. I go to her stable every day. She bites and kicks me almost every day. And after a year and a half, and I begin to develop this love for her. And I begin to realize that that sort of love doesn't need any confirmation whatsoever. And after a year and a half, she puts her muzzle on my shoulder for 2 minutes. And I'll never forget that either, because I didn't go there every day for a year and a half for her to do that. She never needed to give me anything back. And that was extremely helpful. If I didn't go through those years with her, I would never work with animals that has PTSD or go through these healing processes that takes 5, 6, 7, 10 years. Maybe the first 5 without any result that you could see.
So, okay, after she puts her muzzle on your shoulder, what happens then?
Well,
To her, to you both?
quite shortly after that, she gets sick.
Okay.
And you could easily see how a horse would develop a lung disease in an environment that is almost only indoors.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a known thing with overly stabled horses. Yeah.
And you could also maybe add an element of Chinese medicine into the equation, where lung diseases is considered, in some cases, relating to inherent fear and deep grief.
Right.
And what I saw was also a horse that constantly fought for her integrity, and she preserved that. But that also means that during all the time that you do that, because you're in a war, you don't do all these other things.
Right. It's exhausting. Yeah.
And you don't live your life.
Right.
You don't thrive, you don't develop your qualities and talents, you don't make friends, you survive. You do whatever it takes to survive, but you're emotionally depleted and exhausted. So she's going to be put down for this. My grandmother interferes and buys this horse, and at this point I'm 14 years old.
Okay. Have you been riding her?
Yes.
She's not throwing you off?
No, she's not throwing me off. She's brilliant. She runs really fast. You know, she takes the bit and just takes off, and I love it.
So by then, you guys have worked out a relationship of riding together too?
Yep. Yes. That was the sort of easy part, I would say.
Yeah.
It was.
But she was chucking other people off before, right?
Yes, she was.
Yeah, okay. But by now, she's accepted you, and you guys are cool together to what
Yes, well, we're even doing dressage together. We're doing some sort of, when there is this Christmas or Easter or whatever, we're doing little things,
doing the quadrilles and the
Yes.
displays and the, okay.
Like these sort of mirror things when one tiny, because she was very small, she's doing all these things, and another big horse with the same color is doing the same thing. And
A part of the,
yeah, that's the name.
Okay, cool. So you guys work out some harmonious relationship there. She carries you. She agrees to carry you.
Yep.
Then she gets sick, and your grandmother buys the pony. Okay.
She buys the pony, and I am over the moon because now I think that it's all solved and over. Right?
Yeah.
Because I have no idea what you're in for when an animal decides to become your teacher. It's never over, right? So she's being taken from the riding school and put in this stable in the countryside where she can be outside all the time. It's this open stable. She can go in and out. All the stress is taken away. So in my world, all that's going to happen next is that she's going to be well and everyone will live
ever after. Yeah.
And she gets much worse. Because at that point, I don't know that when you have a stress-related disease of some sort and you come to a place where you're safe, everything comes crushing up to the surface at the same time. Now, this is what I tell people when I'm out working and this happens to them. Now I can be supportive of that, but this is the first time it happens to me, so I have no idea. So I try everything, because now the old desperation is back. If she dies, my life is over. There is no opening to the world of non-isolation. And in the meantime, this door that opened between us in our first meeting never really closed, because it's like this double swinging door that is like this. So if I'm near an animal that isn't feeling well, all of a sudden I turn into that animal. I can't control this going in and out.
This is happening to you from this point on with other animals.
Yes. Yeah. Particularly animals that are not feeling well. That's the only pattern I can see. I'm terrified of it and I don't really talk about it. Yeah. And then I try every treatment under the sun to heal this pony. Like alternative treatment, vet medicine, any other vet that someone heard of. And, well, you go through the lot because you're terrified. And
well, it's also the quest you're called to. You have to, in a way.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And she responds to absolutely nothing. And to me, it's incomprehensible. Why can't she get better from anything at all? Then there is divine interference. Divine interference comes in a form of a short notice in the local newspaper. And it's my mother who spots it. I mean, we really don't have much contact and it doesn't work very well, but she spots this notice in the newspaper that says, a veterinarian from New Zealand is coming to Sweden to give a series of lectures in the subject chronic pulmonary diseases in horses and alternative treatments of. I mean, that is not happening. That's too precise. So my mother says, maybe you should go to this. And yeah, I'm going to that lecture. I don't listen to the lecture at all because my only focus is I need to get this man to come and see the pony. So directly after the lecture, I run to this old man and saying, you have to come and see my pony. And he says, yes, fine, we can go tomorrow. I can borrow a car and we go and see your pony because she's in the outskirts she's now outside of the city. And I take a bus out every day and cycle every day. So 2 hours traveling every day to go to this pony. It's still the test of endurance is on, right? And so we're supposed to meet the following day in a cafe. And yeah, I go to the cafe and he says, well, the car broke down, so we can't go to your pony. But now you have a choice. Either you go back to school and make your teachers happy. I wasn't too keen on school, so it wasn't hard for me to skip. Or you stay here and I will tell you about what I do. And I didn't realize that this was one of these crossroads that really matters, because I was just desperate wanting the pony to get better. So I thought, I don't want to lose connection to this guy, so I stay. And this man spent a full day talking to this kid about what he's doing, which includes healing, Chinese medicine, homeopathy, all sorts of energetically based treatments, basically. And during this whole day, when we sit in this cafe, I begin to remember something. Because somehow none of this is new to me. This is something that some part of me already know. And all of a sudden, I understand that I'm meant to do something similar. This is why I get drawn in and out of animals, because I'm meant to be able to do something. So, and it was such a huge relief to find that foundation in me already at the age of 14.
Dot.
Ooh. Yes. So then the next day, the car is fixed. So he says, now we can go to the pony because now the car works. And she responds like clockwork to the treatment.
What does he do?
He puts needles. He gives acupuncture and gives her a mixture of herbs. Amongst them, I know is chili pepper because I have to go and buy it. And she just immediately responds to that.
What's the name of this vet?
Sorry?
What was his name?
Tony Frith. I don't know if he's still alive.
Tony Frith. I might look him up later.
He is in New Zealand.
Okay, cool. Please go on.
Yeah, and he stays for another 1 or 2 weeks in Sweden. So I follow him as an assistant.
Okay.
Because I really want to learn as much as possible. And he's very kind in taking this kid on. And I also realized that Pyret being such, her name was Pyret, means the tiny one, was such a great teacher that the timing of healing, she's not sick because of me. She's not sacrificing herself for my teaching. But the timing of her disease and what I have to learn is absolutely brilliant. And somehow she knows that because she doesn't have that fear that I have. She has completely given herself to her destiny in a way that is at that point still unknown to me. I mean, I struggle to keep everything together. And then this vet, he leaves me with a bunch of acupuncture needles, flies back to the other side of the world and says, now the rest is up to you. And around the same time, my mother says the same thing. My mother, who at that point suffers from a great depression. She can't get out of bed. I remember neighbors having to come in to sort of lift her around. She was in a really bad state. She was in a destructive relationship, plenty of those, but this one may be a bit more particular. And she tells me, this is without anger, she just says, I can't look after you, which is obvious. I will give you a bank account card and the money, the grant you get from the government each month for having a kid, which is about $80. It's like, you will get that amount of money that I would get for you, and you just have to, you have to find a way.
And grandmother is still around at this point?
She's still around, but she is not really feeling very well in herself either. So I get more or less financially independent at that age.
This is what, 1982, 83?
I'm born 74.
Okay, it's a bit later then. It's like,
yeah, it's like late 80s.
Yeah. Okay.
And I have one talent that I don't have to work for, and that is painting.
Okay.
So I become a portrait painter and financially support me and this pony by painting portraits from that day on, which I continued to do until I started to do this as a full-time living. I mean, I don't have time to paint now, but hopefully I will go hide somewhere at some point and continue.
A bit like me in writing. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Time.
Okay, so you're now 15, 16?
14.
It happens at 14.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. And meanwhile, adolescence has happened, puberty's happened.
Yeah.
And has that further opened up any kind of portals in your perception, or has that changed any?
Yes, that door, I'm calmer with it because now I understand that it has a context. But what happens in adolescence is that it becomes messier, meaning messy is maybe not, confusing is maybe a better word, because I had one really frightening experience, and I brought that on myself. We could do that one too. It's a short one, but all all my experiences with ancestors, with other species, it always comes from a source that has kindness.
Okay.
I've never had an encounter with ill intent.
Except for one, you say?
Yeah, except for one.
Okay, tell us that one.
Yeah, it was in this time when all of a sudden I could sit on the tram and I would be in a different place. I would see people that would be deceased or in amongst other people. It's like many doors going like this, as adolescence is, even if you don't add spirituality to it, right? So, and I realized that I have to do something about this. And this only one bad event I have is when I have decided to not listen to any of it. I have this short period, very short, maybe a few days, when I decide to be normal. Get an education, get a proper job, get myself a, secure foundation, not based on all these other things that no one can see or feel. And I decide to, cut your hair and go and get a job, that sort of thing. So I decide to be normal and stop this bullshit nonsense. And at night, when I'm just about to go to sleep and the room is dark, I see this headless figure coming closer to the bed. And it's really scary because it's just moving, and I can't communicate with it, and I can't stop it from moving. And any sort of prayer or way to try to get to a center point doesn't work. And I turn on the lamp and it doesn't work. This being is just moving close. I get sort of heart palpitations when I speak about it now. It's getting to here when I realize that, wait a minute, this figure that I'm looking at, this headless figure, is me. It's my body. I'm killing myself.
Okay.
Because the feeling was that this individual would come and suffocate me. It's like, and ever since that experience, it's like, okay, I promise I will never do anything normal and secure in my whole life.
And the figure, when you have that realization, the figure sort of evaporates.
Yeah, they just wasn't there anymore.
So interesting. Are you still 14 or are you a bit older at this point?
I'm around that, like 15.
Are you having relationships at this point, or are you very much a loner?
I'm a loner at this point. And I'm slightly uninterested in romantic relationships because my friends who has that, they become slightly boring in my eyes.
Right.
They start to sort of sit inside and hold hands, and they're not out on adventures. And
are people observing you, other types of relationships too? So are people observing you, say, doing acupuncture on your pony, which back then would have been something very new, and are people now asking you to do similar things, or are you kind of in isolation?
I'm in isolation in the sense that I'm just doing this for me. The things I do for others is portrait painting.
Okay.
But I've always had friends, and still do. Always lots and lots of friends.
Right.
And
you're not isolated in that regard. You are having relationships, just not romantic.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And then I move school. This is like, now I'm probably 16. And now the pony is back on track. I mean, she's healed from her disease, and I know what I'm meant to be doing. So now it's climbed up from this, there's no way for me, I need to die sort of thing. I'm not there. But in this awakening, I become very provocative. Because all of a sudden, I don't need to conform, right? This whole story of you have to go to school, otherwise you will end up a tramp. that doesn't work for me anymore because I know what I'm meant to be doing. So I know that there is a way. So all this obey or you shall be doomed has no effect. And because I'm stronger, I dare to sort of test my surroundings. So now I turn into a much more sort of feisty type of person. And I begin to study Tao Te Ching. For some reason, I find this tiny little Tao Te Ching book translated by a guy called Stephen Mitchell. And I still read this book because I love that particular translation. And I begin to question every single thing around me. And I go to this school because you change school at that age in Sweden. And I want to focus on biology because I think that maybe that would make sense to me. I realized that I will need typewriting, biology, and English. So this is before you have computer science in school. And this is true. These are the only things that I ever needed. And eventually maybe not biology in the same as much as English and typewriting. And I find like-minded friends that are questioning society in a very non-aggressive way. It's like we will protest against the traffic in the inner city of Gothenburg by dancing samba in the middle of the street so no one can pass us. It's a lot of playfulness. It's not that sort of hatred-driven protesting. And amongst those friends is a person that I really owe gratitude to. And that is a guy who is a musician in this samba band. It's lots of samba dancing. And
The samba is so Swedish.
Yeah. No, but it was the military coup in, what was his name? Pinochet?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Those refugees, the kids born in that flight. From Chile would be about my age. That's the samba squad.
Okay.
Anyway, and this is the first time since my father that I meet an absolute person. This samba musician is completely in a world of his own. We never really spoke because you couldn't. He always had these headphones on and he was always playing samba on everything. On the table, on his body, on his teeth, on his bag, on the lessons, outside of the lessons, in the canteen. And what I noticed with him doing that was that obviously he was 100% true to himself. Mm-hmm. He wasn't playing samba. He was samba.
Got it.
And because he was it, no one could have an opinion about that. He just was who he is. Mm. So no one ever asked him to stop. No one told him that your life is doomed and you shall all be sort of in poverty and hell unless you start listening to your teachers. They let him be. So I noticed his way through the world in school and realized that, okay, if he can do that, I can do that too. I'm not meant to play samba. I'm meant to do something completely different. I'm meant to do empathic interbeing with other species. And if I'm 100% true to that without making any excuses, the world is not going to stop me. This was so incredibly helpful that I actually found this guy's phone number a couple of years ago and wrote him a text to say thank you. And he said, oh, I didn't realize that would affect anyone else, but he had come to exactly the same conclusions for himself.
What he got on to do, by the way, out of interest?
He is still a samba musician. He is in some really good orchestras, playing with some really good sort of well-known Swedish musicians. He can make a living out of it. And he has a samba school in Rio.
Fantastic. Okay. So you're now heading for college?
Yeah, this is sort of college, I suppose. College. Okay. When you're sort of 16 to 19, kind of.
What's interesting to me so far is that with the possible exception of the pony, and I presume you are trail riding the pony in the forest.
Yes.
So far, the forest has not entered the story. And I remember when I went to Sweden at 12 years old, I was taken there. I was in a choir, and the choir went on tour in Sweden for some reason. And so I found myself there. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is such a beautiful place. and the forest, of course, being everywhere. And so I remember going to Gothenburg.
Mhm.
That was our entry point. Now that I think, yeah, we went on the boat and we entered at Gothenburg. And okay, Gothenburg was a city, but I was coming from London. It's like, it's not a
Yeah.
you
No,
know,
it's not a city, it's a town.
and so, the forest is like there, every,
Yes.
like, it's not like London where you'd have to, cycle for half a day to get to the city. It's like, no, the forest is there. So even if you're in a high rise in Gothenburg, the forest is accessible. It's close.
Yes, no, the forest is actually in it all along because me
Okay.
told me
So just dial us back to the forest.
Yeah.
When does the forest enter your life and how?
it starts with these big beech trees.
Okay.
It definitely does. And a constant feeling of the forest being home.
Right.
And I would say that that's still the nature type that, well, I love all nature types, not
Right,
trying
but
to
it's
do
the
that. But the forest is
ecosystem
really close.
that you grew up in. Absolutely.
Yes,
But
and I remember also seeing these big floaty, almost whitish, big round things floating between the trees. I still, to this day, don't know what that is, but like some sort of forest spirits. They wouldn't be there all the time, but the times that I had seen them, I just love that feeling.
did they
So
ever talk to you?
no, those never did. It was just a presence.
Okay.
But I also began to see what we in Sweden call little people, like small forest spirits or nature spirits.
At what age do you see them, and how does
Around,
your
around
interaction?
this 14, 15, 16, around the time when, yeah.
As you may know, if you've been following my work, we are also horsey folk here, and we have been training horses for many, many years in the manner of the old classical dressage masters. This is something which is often very confusing for people. We shine a light on that murky, difficult stuff and make it crystal clear. If you'd like to learn to train your horse in the manner of the old masters and really have fun and joy for you and your equine, go to our website, heliosharmony.com, sign up as a premium member and begin to take the Helios Harmony course, which will take you from zero to the piaffe, where the horse is dancing on the spot, in hand, on the ground. And then from there, you can develop out to anywhere you want to. heliosharmony.com to unlock the secrets of the old masters. Okay, that's interesting to me. Not younger, because I think
No, but I was never
younger
really.
kids report seeing things like this, but then they stop seeing them usually at adolescence.
No, I was in the city. I saw mainly dead relatives and.
Okay. So you, when you were a kid, dead relatives, and then as soon as you managed to get out to the country with this,
Yes.
you began to meet little people.
Yes.
Did the little people talk to you?
Yes.
What do they say?
Well, it's a lot about healing, generosity, how to help nature, I would say.
Okay.
Like an embodiment of helping nature the way I
Do you
do.
remember, do certain conversations or interactions stand out?
No, not really, but I remember like learning about different plants and these sort of things. So when I realized that I no longer need to be obedient and I was almost never in school anymore, except a few days a week to get inspired by samba friends, then I would be out in the forest looking for forest spirits.
Okay. Would you always find them?
No, that
And
wasn't really the point. I think the point was that it was it just felt like a quest that made sense.
indeed, when you found them,
Yes.
how did you find? Like, what was it?
I think they'd find you.
How they'd appear?
They would just appear as sort of almost like being one with the stone or a tree, and they would sort of come out.
And say, "Hey, how's it going?" Or
Well,
what would the initial?
I would feel
interaction
huge
be?
respect for them because they're tough and a bit sharp, and I wouldn't sort of, if I would see them, it would feel like a huge sort of thing, and I would never dare to sort of ask anything more than having got the chance.
Would you greet them?
Yes, I would greet them.
And how would you greet them?
I would greet them like I would greet anything, like I see you.
And to which they would say?
Sort of noticing me, wordless.
and then saying, "Oh right, Emelie, we got something to teach you. I'm going to teach you about this plant now."
Yes, they could be like that.
Okay. Any physical interaction?
No, not except sort of things disappearing and moving and those sort of things.
But not physically touching you.
No.
And then talk to us about the variety. What do they look like?
They look like an embodiment of, like a personalized embodiment of nature. They don't really look like humans, but
Right. So you're not seeing a little, because when you say little people, one thinks of a small person.
yes, but I think we make them more human.
Would you see them as human through your mind's eye? Is that how you?
No, but they would have similar shapes to humans, meaning that they could have arms and legs.
Okay. Arms, legs, eyes, mouth.
Yeah,
Okay. And always small?
those types always small.
What other types were there?
No, but other types like more fairy types that would be more transparent and bigger.
Talk to us about those. How they appear? How do you interact with them?
It feels like, always feels disrespectful to talk about them, but I will try.
Indeed. But I think people need these conversations.
I know.
If you don't talk about it, then it's also bullshit, right? Because either we're relegating it to fantasy,
Yes, no,
we're bringing this kind of superstitious awe,
yeah,
which is often around the sort of fairy thing that you're not allowed to refer to them directly, the good people,
yeah.
this people that and therefore they're sort of slightly threatening. What about just talking about them, because we meet it with
By the
nature?
little ones, the small people are sharp. I think they need to be sharp with humans because we tend to not really stick to our word.
Well, because we bulldoze their environments and create
Yes,
tunnels.
yes. If they decide to go into really helping you,
Yes.
they probably want to make sure that you're actually going to turn up.
Okay.
We have a class here where the entire content comes from them in relating to plant medicine from a completely different perspective, actually not using the plants like we think about using plants. And they teach much more about in the relationship with the plant, already there is a healing sort of.
Right.
And there it's very important to actually show up, to come on time, to come on all the different classes and not just sort of seeing it as a.
Did you meet the same entities as individuals often, or was it always a different individual every time?
In this particular class, it's the same one.
No, but I'm talking about back you in the forest.
No, some would be repetitively similar, the same, and some would be new.
So there would be definitely relationships that
Yes.
carried over. You knew the same entity
Yes.
over time. What was the longest running relationship that you had there?
That would have been for a number of years, when for as long as this pony was in the same area. So I would be around in the same forests.
I'm talking about a particular individual being.
Yeah, yes.
Can you talk to us about a particular individual being that you related to over a number of years and what the course of that relationship was? Because I think, let's say in like a fairy story, the idea is you might have an encounter in the forest with a supernatural being, and it's usually either a one-off or, and with some sort of test involved, or some sort of relationship with some sort of wish granting or showing you a quest and then gone. But very rarely do you read about Cinderella just going around for a cup of tea, with the nature spirits, for the next 30 years.
Yeah, because the
philosophy.
importance isn't such a interesting story, maybe.
Right, exactly. So I'm more interested. Yeah, I'm interested in the relationship. I want to know.
I'm thinking about one that I would consider male in the energy, that would be helpful in the time when Pyret was directly, when her healing started after the vet and stuff. That would sort of show himself on and off. And the subject, and I'm really trying to think about it now, was a lot about healing and helping animals. And the same here. I'm thinking about one, there's also male type in a specific place where there are fir trees. And I don't know the number of years on that one because I've been here for long now. And then the woman type one that is designing the course for us, that's for 1.5 years. That's a shorter one.
The male ones were coming out of stones, trees,
Yes,
but which?
mainly trees.
Okay. Do you remember which tree? Which type of tree?
Oh, and then there was the one who helped with like making it more open in this empathic communication. That was a juniper tree.
Okay. Male or female?
Trees, male. Fir trees, juniper trees, pine trees.
And they could be male or female?
Yes.
Okay. Spirits of water?
Yes. Yes.
Talk to us about them.
Like really playful and like a sense of sort of water fairies.
Male, female, both?
Both. Actually, less of a gender.
And
Me.
what would the lesson normally be, or the teaching or the interaction be with the water?
I think there are all these lessons that are with and through water as memory carrier.
Memory carrier. Liquid intelligence,
Yeah.
right.
But that wouldn't be them. That would be the water.
Okay.
I think in a way they are so close to us. It's just like another dimension and a slightly different intention, maybe. They seem to be somehow less dense than us, and their time seems slightly different. But I think not always when you meet them, you're sort of targeted as their focus. It's like sometimes they would come out and teach and share something because I would be worried about a sick animal and I wouldn't know what to do. And they would maybe know what to do. But it could also just be that we're both living here. They're living in the same stream that I'm also living close to. And sometimes, for some reason, we can interact and meet. But it doesn't necessarily involve tests or quests or teachings. It can do. But I think more than that, it's like, it's just, they're just there because they live their lives there just like we do. For some reason, we've cut them out of our way of experiencing reality. But maybe that's because we relate to just one segment of time space.
Yeah, I'm so when you were roaming around the forest as a young woman, did you encounter other people who also saw and interacted with these entities, or were you the only one?
No, I would be the only one. Until I met Maori people in New Zealand, I would be quite alone on that.
Because quite a lot of people in Scandinavia are still quite connected to the land and the forest. Why do you think you were isolated in that there weren't like a small community of people like, oh, you see them too, type thing?
And maybe more people saw them, but we didn't speak about it for some reason. Or because my life was so much in the city.
Who was the first person you confided to that you were having these interactions? Your grandmother?
My grandmother, yes.
And she went, oh yeah, that's totally normal. I see him all the time. Okay. So you had some sort of moral support, some sort of validation with that. Did you tell your mother?
No.
Okay.
We almost didn't speak. I ran away from home at the age of 15, 16. We didn't communicate.
Right, got it. So, but the grandmother there. And then what about friends? Did you tell them?
Yeah, I probably did, yes.
And what did they say?
They didn't make a thing out of it.
Did some say, please introduce? I mean, I would have been like, please introduce me. I would like.
No, I can't remember anyone saying that.
I can't imagine saying anything else. I mean, it's like
there is a great interest in them now, actually.
Yeah.
But it hasn't really been until now.
As I remember being acutely aware of all sorts of energies around me all through childhood and adolescence, and occasionally glimpsing things. No sorts of interactions as you've described, but glimpses. And feelings and emotions, and feeling that I should now go over there, and indeed there would be something over there, but not an entity, if you like, an experience perhaps. But then it wasn't until I became obviously drawn in with the sun and the Bushmen and all of that I got shown certain things, but always through the intercession of a shaman. I'm just trying to think if I've had interactions with what I would imagine would be mischievous ghosts and sprites and things a bit, but not particularly in Ireland, but not.
I'm not surprised about that.
And a couple of us. But you know what I mean? So we all have, but it would have been intriguing to me to say, if, and now I'm lucky enough, I know I am going to go into the forest with you in a matter of weeks. So fantastic. And I would like to be introduced in whatever way, please, because my feeling is that it's time to have these conversations openly. I think we're finally at a juncture in our society where a conversation like this is not either dismissed as fancy or delusion or psychosis.
Yeah, no, true.
However, psychosis is, I think, a necessary and natural part of looking at reality in order to see beyond linear dimension. The difficulty is but now, and now with people using psychoactive plants in our society and that sort of thing, suddenly people are allowed to have these conversations because they're now seeing the same sorts of entities. That, I did ayahuasca and I saw that one too, and blah. And this is now suddenly post-COVID kind of entered the mainstream, but it's very recent. But I do feel that that's why I'm asking these very direct sort of questions.
Yeah, no, I like the direct.
And I don't want to waste my time with that. Do you think it's real? I want to know what they said, what they look like, what the intention is. Here's a question. Do you think more of them are showing themselves now? Do you think that there's obviously we've been destroying nature for a long time, but not quite on the level that we are currently? Yep. Do they have an agenda? Do they have would they be fine if we cut the forest down anyway?
No, they wouldn't be fine if we cut it down anyway, but it wouldn't make them give up.
Would they cease to exist? If you're a fir tree spirit and you cut the fir tree down, do you cease to exist?
No, you don't cease to exist. You might not have that place as a base, but your intention to help restoring nature would be enhanced almost.
Why do they care about nature? I mean, you could say, okay, well, they live in it, they are it, but why do they give a shit? I mean, if we destroy ourselves in nature, presumably nature will come back, and
they can't do anything else.
Okay.
It's like
a mother's love.
Yeah, it seems like the source of this life, of any story from any animal, plant, forest spirit, ancestor, it seems like whoever created this did do it with a loving intent.
That was going to be my question. Are they manifestations of love?
Yes. In a way. Well, I think it seems like the intent is love. And if we are connected to that source, that intent is living through us, regardless if I'm a human or a dog or a fairy or the fir tree or whatever. And then it seems like whatever goes against these care for the living space, it seems like we in a linear society, we care so much about development, that we're going to develop spiritually, and then we will get more enlightened, and then eventually we will never be reborn again and whatsoever. You never hear those stories from anyone else. What you hear is that the miracle that life is even possible is the meaning. So you don't need anything beyond life. So to help create and uphold the living space is like the most sacred thing you could ever do. And to not do that just doesn't make sense at all. So if a human somehow goes against, maybe with an immature version of a creative potential, we start to destroy things around us instead, then they don't hate us for that. But obviously we are in great need of help, because if we are preventing living space from expanding and for life to be lived in its own fullness, then maybe we are the ones to reach out to. And with our hierarchical way of seeing ourselves as the sort of crown of creation, we might think that everyone else who is alive has no consciousness, no awareness of anything, and all in the end aspire to be human. And I beg to differ. They don't judge us, but they also don't praise us. But we are a bit lost, and we need all the help we can get in being included again.
Are these entities ageless, or do they, like us, do they live and die?
They seem to live and die, but maybe in a slightly different time span of things.
Give us...
Like maybe aging slower.
Right. But is there a point at which, say, for example...
They look like the same age forever, but I can still see that some of them look old and some of them look young.
And do some of them say, I'm about to pass, or do others say, I've only just got here?
I never asked.
Would you?
Yeah, I could.
You know, in this podcast, I want to get through your bio, and we haven't even gotten to. I know that you spent time in the Middle East and then come back. Yeah,
a sequence.
Right. So I'm gonna hold the fairies for now. And I'm gonna request that we do a separate podcast just about that.
Yeah,
because that's its own universe, and there's a lot of things I would like to add and share.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly in terms of things in the Kalahari and so on and so on. But I think if we do that, that's going to be the entire podcast, and it should actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm intrigued. I want to do one on fairies so bad. Please, can we?
Yes, we can.
All right. So, okay, you're talking to... Ooh, one last thing. Because it's Scandinavia, and I've got to ask, trolls.
Yeah, not the sort of fairy tale trolls I would never have seen.
Would you say that there's a troll thing that's different to the other entities that you're talking about?
Yes, but no, it wouldn't be bad. It would just be sort of big and more
mountainy.
Yeah.
Not ancestral memories passed down by farming people of hunter-gatherers who were there beforehand and perhaps wiped out or consigned to the forest, who then become the troll in the imagination. The troll actually is the nature spirit.
Well, I would believe both are possible.
Okay, so perhaps some amalgamation of the two.
Yes. I think a lot of things are, especially when they're being told about.
Yeah.
Because with the empathic interbeing, you experience something and then you pass it on. And in the
imagine things into being.
Yeah, and in the passing on, it will go through my entire conditioning.
Yeah, I got it.
Whether I like it or not. And I can try to be as true as I can to the source, but I also have to respect that I am also my genetic self.
Right, and I guess if everything is light and everything is love and everything is energy, then we're going to see that through the prism of the lens that we are, which means that we'll interpret it to look like this or to look like that or to say this.
They have. And how they keep telling their stories.
I'm so tempted to just go down this rabbit hole right now. I'm sorry. So I really want to talk about you, but now it's like, oh no, I want to talk about trolls. What are their stories, quickly, before we go back to you?
Well, but I think as humans, we always think that we hold the sort of centerpiece of the stories.
We are the storytelling ape, right? That is us.
And we are the sort of, we interpret everything else, but we hold the sort of fact, and we don't. I mean, they would have their ancestry lines and stories on how they got to Earth and the role that they're playing and what they tell their children. right? Which would affect.
We've got to revisit this, because everything you say, they say, well, what are they telling their children? What are their stories? How did they get to Earth? What do they think about aliens? You know,
No, I think it's like we live a modern human being. We have a very very limited experience of time. I mean, we stick to one version, and I mean it's difficult enough. So you can easily see how that would fill a full lifetime. But I still think we're. I
yeah,
mean,
no, I agree. I'm
think it's
because I've been
easier
privileged to live with people a bit who are absolutely of the place, who do not see themselves as the top of a hierarchy in nature, who that I do know that that's the authentic human way to be, and that's honestly the only way to be happy, because to be inauthentic is to be unhappy, right? And we know that in our culture we are desperately unhappy.
we are.
Is why aren't these entities showing themselves to everybody? Wouldn't it just be easier if they just showed up in the living room constantly and like, oi, lads, out there, plant a tree, come on.
Yeah, but maybe they do.
Mm.
I mean, maybe it's
Do
not there.
like, do they walk around your living room, or do you have to go into the forest to see them?
I wouldn't say that they tend to be in the living room. They tend to be in nature,
Right.
quite
But
close.
your living room is not far from nature, right?
Exactly. So they would be around.
Is there anyone around you right now?
No, not in here. No,
If there was a,
over in the around the barn just before.
there were.
Yeah,
What did they say?
I think they were helping out with chickens.
What were they doing with the chickens?
It seems like a lot of things that we think is happening by themselves, like leaves moving, cleaning, helping water. It's like all these things that we think is just sort of randomly happening, like in a machinery.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be involved in.
What were they doing with the chickens specifically?
Well, the chicken barn is just about to be cleansed. So they were just around some chickens that are a little bit weaker and sort of moving
Okay.
things around accordingly.
Man, we gotta revisit this. We gotta revisit this a lot. Okay, listeners, we are going to. I'm not going to let Emelie get away with not talking to us in depth about fairies and trolls and things, because I mean, the thought of having to live without that is just too painful.
Yeah, I know.
But
That is
let's just move on now in your life. So you're dancing samba, you're talking to fairies, you're giving acupuncture to your horse, you're becoming a biologist. You're
in a row.
I know. Uh,
Yeah.
what happens next? Now you're a young woman, you head out into the world, and
Yeah.
the
Uh,
pony retires, by the way, dies.
no. The pony is there. The pony lives until the age of 36
Perfect.
and is the one who is founding this whole sanctuary before she dies.
Okay, got it. Okay, so
So
she
her dream is fulfilled. When she dies, she is very content.
super.
Mm.
Okay, so take us now. You're at university. What happens next?
Not university, it's like a college thing.
All right.
I realize that university is
Say potato. Yeah.
because the subjects I'm into is not there. So
Okay.
and I'm not really very good at sitting still indoors. It totally actually does not work at all. What happens is that, well, the next thing I guess that happens is that my grandmother kills herself.
Mm-hmm.
When, no, at some point, since I was very young, I always felt that I couldn't really recognize myself in the mirror. It was a bit confusing. I should have red or black hair, and it didn't make sense that I was blonde at that time. And I knew that I had some sort of connection to Ireland, so I knew that I had to go there.
How did you know that?
I just knew
Okay.
that there is something about Ireland that I have to visit. So my grandmother would naturally say, "Oh, maybe you have a past life there, so could be normal."
Well, also from my point of view, actually, I mean, we know that all of us living between the North Sea, the Baltic, the Irish Sea, the Northwest Atlantic, we're basically all the same tribal folk who've been
We are.
going back and forth and back and forth. So you think, oh, I'm from Sweden. That's so far from Ireland. It's like, no, it's not. Yeah, people were traveling back and forth, and we're all Viking Celts sort of thing. So okay, so let's say it's in your ancestry.
Yeah, somehow it's in my ancestry, and I go to Ireland, and and hitchhike around Ireland at, I think I'm 16,
Okay.
17 maximum, 16 maybe. And that is a very good experience because I begin to realize that I can trust my own feet, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that is what my grandmother is picking up on, because she has made a promise to my father to look after me. And maybe she feels that she doesn't have to look after me anymore. I don't know. But she tries to kill herself after an argument with my grandfather.
Okay.
That, I think, deeply put her in a situation of questioning her whole life. And again, if we look at the women in that side of the family, they are upper middle class, highly intelligent, and have no area to express themselves at all. They are housewives, and they hate it. Her mother was the first woman in Sweden who studied to become a doctor. Then, not a nurse, but a doctor. Then she married someone, and or she was in the class where the first took in women. So there would be a few. And then her husband, she got married, her husband forbade her to continue the studies. And she was then left with this husband, no education, lots of kids. And eventually she divorced in a time when no one did that.
This is your great-grandmother?
Yes. So her dream is unfulfilled in a way, and that is passed on to my grandmother's dream, who is unfulfilled, and she ends up in the same situation. The only story that is possible to embody is the housewife outline. And although she's doing this healing and all of these other things, she has other dreams, and she has this growing bitterness, I would say, that I could feel from her. And she puts her entire effort into her family. And
What was her husband? What did your grandfather do?
he was an introvert.
Professionally?
Yeah, he was some sort of, yeah, he was a professional introvert. He was he was some sort of lawyer.
Yeah.
All in the head.
Mm.
And he was really good at playing the violin. Now, in an argument, my grandmother forbade him to play violin, so he bought a cottage up in the mountains outside of Gothenburg, where he would go and play violin in the
Why
evening.
would she forbid him from playing violin?
Well, there are so many questions. I guess when you begin to not live your story,
You don't want other people
I
to.
prevent others from doing the same. It's maybe my only.
Did he prevent her from having a career or anything? Or was it just she felt
I don't know. I don't know if he personally did, or if it was just a patriarchal society and he became a face of that.
Right.
I would have been too young to.
Because by the sort of 1960s, when your grandmother would have been in, say, her 60s or 50s, surely that was breaking apart post World War II. And
But I think it's all these other things, our self-image, our ancestral stories that continue until they don't. All of these things. One argument, it turned out that my grandfather, she put all her efforts into the family, trying to create a meaning somehow, is my conclusion. And it turned out that he had a love affair years back. And somehow that, although that wasn't such a big thing, it wouldn't be such a big thing by my standards, but somehow it cracked a hole and made everything just lose its value for her.
Even at that age, even at that
age, she was 81 when she killed herself. So she did a full attempt, and my grandfather found her. She made him promise not to save her, but he couldn't keep that promise, so she survived. And she was, naturally, she was in the hospital being guarded by a nurse because they considered her so suicidal that they didn't dare to leave her alone. And all she wanted was to die. And me, my mother and grandfather was called to her bed. And the doctor said, you have to make a decision as her closest kin. We can keep guarding her for as long as she lives, but that would mean that we force her to live. If we let her out from here, most likely she will try again and maybe she will succeed. And the choice has to be yours. And without even looking at each other. And I mean, we're not people that would communicate the rest of the time, so it's not that we get on. But we all simultaneously, I'm 17 at the time, say that we have to let her loose. We can't force her to live. It's undignified. It's impossible. So it wasn't that many months after that she succeeded in killing herself.
And your grandfather then lived alone for the rest of his
My
life?
grandfather, after this happened, also being blamed for the whole thing in a letter, became blind only days after she died and was taken to an old people's home where he sadly ended up starving to death because he couldn't live with himself after this event and also was not in a position of being able to kill himself. So he died very slowly in a state of deep suffering.
You just stopped eating?
Yeah.
Yeah. Poor son, poor people. Gosh,
Yes.
it just seems so unnecessary to
It's unnecessary.
go around when you could just be in the forest talking to the little people.
I know, it is unnecessary. This whole belief in suffering, pain, I believe we all have in our lives. And it's also even helpful as much as we don't feel it at the time. But suffering, I would say, is something totally different. In suffering, we have choices. We might not.
It seems to be a blindness to the, as you said, the joy of creation. And if those nature entities are there trying to draw our attention back to it constantly and saying, you know,
there is another way. It's like this constantly saying there is another way. It will make you happier.
And everything doesn't
Better
so
for
personal.
everyone.
Yeah, it's like why is it wanting to be about me? Yeah, but it's hard if little people are not talking to you. But although it seems that they sort of were to your grandmother, so.
Yes, and did you see this? Exactly this reasoning is what came to me after her death, except, of course, this huge grief. But how could she have all that and it still wasn't possible to live in herself? Does that mean that everything she said was wrong? Or is life just a lot more complex?
Yeah. Yeah, it's because it would seem if you had your eyes open to those dimensions of reality that it would be hard to remain bitter because
yes,
it's just too interesting. You know, I mean, it's like, yeah, you might.
But I think it's also a constant, all of these spiritual traditions where you have constant, like in Islam, in the Sufis, they have dhikr and you have meditation and this remembrance. We have to constantly work on remembering the source because
shamanic rituals.
Yes. The minute we don't, we are overwhelmed again with the reality around us. So I think it's not really enough to feel it once and then it's there. It's helpful to feel it once because then it's easier to find it the second time. And if we find it the second time, it's easier the third time. But we still have to live with this person that we are, with the genetic story that is up to me to transform as I play my part in my little chunk of time. And she has given me a huge freedom. So although her story is tragic in very many ways, she also, maybe she couldn't open those doors for her, but she could open them for me.
Yeah. Okay. So she does that. And then you go to Ireland shortly after.
Yes, I go to Ireland and I start to work and live in Ireland on and off.
Okay. And what do you do? What do you do in Ireland?
I start by riding young Connemara ponies in the middle of Connemara.
Perfect. On the Burren.
Yes, in County Galway, Connemara, in a place called Cashel.
Okay, I know what that is. Yeah. Okay.
And then I get to know an old Celtic woman in County Mayo, near a small town called Linan, who she doesn't live anymore. Her name was Bina McLaughlin. And she was a fierce thing, Celtic-speaking, herb woman, shepherd, original human being. And we became friends, a very stormy type of friendship, because I think that would be the only way you could have a friendship with such a character. But I became her sort of friend and student on and off for years as well.
Of?
On and off, yeah. I would travel on and off
The
to
student of?
the Celtic traditions of herbs and nature spirits and any other, everything she did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And to me, what was mind-blowing to meet, I'm 17, and I know that I'm meant to be doing this, and I've seen that it's possible to follow your path, but to see someone elderly, she was in her 70s when I got to know her, really doing that and sort of standing up for it and being completely outcast, but still, yeah, it's possible. I mean, she really showed me it's possible.
Okay, and you would sort of come and go from her homestead, meanwhile you had a job breaking training horses.
Yes, and I also, I mean, I'm still supposed to be in school in Sweden, and I have the pony to look after.
Okay.
So I'm sort of circling around these things.
Okay. And where do you go from that point?
From that point, there is one experience that is so important that it has to be thrown in. At this point, you know, I'm protesting against everything in a sort of not angry way, but I'm dancing constantly. I'm always at some sort of party, drinking tons of alcohol and never taking any drugs, because I figured out two things. If I find a drug that soothes my inner pain, I will be on it forever. So someone like me cannot try heroin. No, it would kill me.
Because the problem is it works. Yeah.
Yes, it works. And I realized that it would work brilliantly on me, so I can't take it.
Yeah.
And I would not be strong enough to come off it. And number two, if I would take any other drug, it would be like disrespecting all these experiences that I'm already having.
Mm-hmm.
So no drugs, but a lot of dancing and drinking and not much sleep. Very, very intense living, because I explore all these areas at the same time.
Sure.
And then for some reason, and I have this feministic story in my family, you know, of all these women trying to find a way and unsuccessfully living very unfulfilled lives. So this is also a topic that is constantly with me. So one day I decide to start to live in celibacy. And it's not for moral reasons, and it's not with a time frame. It's not a sort of vow, but I want to try it. So I decide, I think I'm 18 maybe, I decide to live in celibacy. And why this is so important, because I think it is about identity and what prevents us from finding our dreams. Could be all sorts of things. And so I'm out in a bar drinking and dancing as usual, and I'm being chatted up by some guy. And I tell him halfway through the conversation that, oops, wait a minute, he probably thinks that we're going to go back after this to his place. I need to tell him that I'm in celibacy, not to disappoint him. So I say, by the way, nothing more is going to happen tonight because I'm in celibacy. And the change in his face, all of it was like watching the sort of arm of a clock just shift. And I became a person. We became friends for years after that, until I left Gothenburg, actually. And I remember walking out of that pub in the middle of the night, in the middle of Gothenburg city center, seeing all these advertisements, you know, all these newspapers and films and half-naked women all looking the same, and realized with full insight that this is not my story. This total freedom of not belonging to having to fulfill that story is one of maybe the most important things that ever happened to me. Because somehow I got out of not only my family's story of the women's roles, but that whole cultural expectation, and it never really came back.
Did you stay in celibacy for the rest of your life?
No, I stayed in celibacy for maybe 6 months. It wasn't even a big thing to break it. It was just that I eventually met someone that I wanted to break it with.
Right.
But that wasn't the point.
Yeah, I see.
The point was that I realized that it's my choice. And it totally changes the way people perceive me. Yes.
It's it's interesting that, as you say, to go out and see all the advertising and now it would be even more
Yeah. All
intense
those
with social
stories that
media.
you're bombarded by them, you know?
Yeah, no, you are. You are. Okay, so
I
you
think that makes sense in all the other stories.
so you're liberated. You have
Yeah.
this kind of, wow, I don't have to be shackled to those
No,
expectations.
it's got nothing to do with me.
What happens next?
What happens next is that school is finishing, and I have honestly not spent much time in it, but I'm so happy when it's over because I know that I'm never going to be in a building again. And my feeling throughout school, the later years, is that I understand what the teachers want. I understand what I need to give them to get good grades. But if I do that, for reasons I can't explain, if I do that, I'm going to lose something else. And what I will lose is going to prevent me from doing what I'm meant to be doing. So I'm resisting every possible attempt to
Colonize you.
yes. And to me, it's a fight for my life.
Okay.
I begin to understand the ponies fight in the riding school.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking of.
It's a real fight. And it's constant. It's daily. To not be drawn into a reality that I might never be able to get out of.
Okay, so you leave school.
I leave school, and as we leave school, which in Sweden you finish school around in June, earlier that spring, 2 friends of mine are going to Greenland. They're going to Greenland fishing and hunting and camping and just being there for like 2-3 months. And for some reason, they ask me if I want to come with them. Which, of course, I always found it very hard to resist an adventure.
Irresistible. Okay.
That was irresistible. So, so I go to Greenland with them, and that is life-altering again. Because we are hunting and fishing and camping and out in nature without seeing traces of humans for weeks. And finally, I begin to feel good, like this underlying pain that has always followed me through life is not there when I'm in the wilderness. So I finally realized that maybe nothing is wrong with me. Maybe I'm just in the wrong environment.
How long are you out in Greenland for?
Well, first we are there for like 2 months, and then they start working in a fish factory. So they stay for a year. But I know that I have to go back to this pony, and I know I want to study acupuncture. And so I travel by myself for the last month and hitchhiking with a cargo ship to the north of Greenland and camping then by myself, which is even better from this wilderness experience perspective. And also meeting amazing people, like the people on the cargo ship. There was a moment when the cargo ship left shore and I realized that I'm the only woman aboard, and there are no mobile phones. This is before all of that. Not sure they would work there anyway. And was this really such a smart idea? But it was a smart idea because there were amazing people.
Were they Greenlanders or was it?
There were a mixed crew of Danish and Greenlandic, Inuit.
When you're camping up by yourself in the north of Greenland, what are the nature entities that you meet?
Well, first, I think with Greenland is the vastness. It's so huge. And so all of a sudden, your human perspective is put in the right place. You're tiny. You're surrounded by species that were there for so long before you. That it's just that is sort of calming. And the nature spirits would be, except that there are no trees, but there would be similar beings coming out of the nature there. Definitely.
Anyone that sticks in your memory in particular?
No, actually not, because the whole thing was
Did they come and converse with you and show you things, or not in the same way that you'd encountered them in the forest in Sweden?
Well, it would be similar. And it's helping sort of where to find water, how to find, they know the land. They know everyone.
And they're friendly to you?
Yes. They're sort of harsh and friendly.
Yeah. Sort of like Scandinavians.
Yes. Yes. What?
Were the Irish fairies different? I mean, I've gone back to I can't stop it.
No, I would agree that there is a remarkable sense of cheekiness on the Irish side.
Yeah. we gotta go back to this. All right. I'm going to force myself to stick to the timeline now. You have this. You go deeply into the wilderness in Greenland. This is amazing.
Yes.
But then you go back. You want to study acupuncture. You want to.
Yeah. Then I go back, and as I fly back to Gothenburg in only 4 hours, as it takes, the shock for the system to go back into a city is the final sort of, all right, and now, Emelie, you're out of the city. For everything that this place has given you, and as correct that it was probably in the preciseness exactly how it should be, this is the end of city life forever. And it was.
Where'd you go then?
Oh, I did some sort of odd jobs here and there, working in stables and barns and with cows and horses and whatever too. And then I went to the place where I live now.
Okay.
So I was 21 when I moved to where I am now, and decided to, sorry, because I failed so completely in that. My idea was to hide from the world.
Oh, well done. Yes.
and really grow potatoes, be, self-sufficient, live in a sort of cyclic, harmonious relationship with nature and never be seen again sort of thing.
Yeah.
And some of those things went really well, but the never seen again part went totally bad.
Why did that go bad? Why did that not happen?
Because that's not what I really wanted. And that's not what
it's not human. Yeah, really.
No. I think what it was is that when you have an awakening of any kind as a human being, especially if it is empathically, and you realize what we've done to this planet, I mean, we can't really make any excuses for that. I mean, we have done a lot of destructive things. I think one way of looking at it is if I go into hiding and try to interfere as little as possible, I will reverse some of that harm. But then when you communicate with other species, that's not what they say. They constantly convey that the way for humans is to step back in. We're not supposed to be less involved. We're already shut off to as much as is doable. That's not the way forward. The way forward seemed to interact, step back in, somehow live and share this life with everyone else who is here.
How does that evolve, though, that you go from this sort of loner hippie girl open to things that other people don't see to opening up to offer other people courses in how to do this, also running this big animal rescue? It's a fair old jump.
Yes, but the essence has always remained. I'm still in the same sort of tiny shoebox house, and there is nothing glamorous about it. It's not a huge profit, so people are employed. It's volunteers.
No, but what I mean is it's a big jump to go to saying, reaching out to your fellow man and saying, I can show you how to do this. I can show you how to.
It's huge, and if it was
to relate this way, how did that happen?
It was the horses that started it. I blame them.
Okay.
But what really happened is maybe we need another podcast for that too.
We certainly need another podcast. Yeah.
But that was when I began to dream. The more you spend time with other species reality, you realize that the human linear hierarchy and domination is like a disease.
Mm.
So if that is the only way to interact with domesticated animals, then I have to stop living with domesticated animals. And since I love all these animals that live here, and I can't really let them loose in the forest because that's not the society we're in, then I'm desperate to find another way. So I put the question out to the universe, basically saying, is domination necessary in the handling of animals? Because I really, really need to know. And then I begin to dream. I begin to dream about New Zealand and go to the Maori people. I dream about Jordan and end up with the Hashemite royal horses in Jordan and other parts of the world, that eventually becomes a story of what is when there is no hierarchy and domination, what actually could be. And as that happens, I think that would maybe be another podcast as well, to maybe dive into some of those events. Then you realize that you don't get such an adventure given to you just to keep it for yourself. It doesn't mean that you're on a mission. It doesn't mean that I believe that I'm right and others are wrong. It's none of that. It's not a missionary thing. But it would be wrong not to make it available. Then I wouldn't have done my part.
So anyone who's listened to this far is going to go, what happened in Jordan and what happened with the Maori? All right. Well, ready.
We'll get to that.
Well, we're somewhat over the 2-hour mark. What I think we should do is I think we should pause.
Yes.
But we're going to pause with a couple of questions. And I promise every listener, provided Emelie agrees, which I'm going to force her to, because I'm guilt tripping people because I'm hard.
I owe you anyway for bringing me back into humanity.
Well, yeah.
What was it?
I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but
it is a good thing.
okay.
We have to believe.
Questions come to mind like, you end up in Jordan with the king's horses, blah, blah. But I mean, that's hierarchical. And
yes, exactly. And that's sort of divine sense of humor.
Right. And you end up with the Maori.
Never thought you would find
warrior society.
Yes.
Also hierarchical.
Yes, very.
So there's going to be questions. Clearly, there's some paradoxical, interesting stuff there, right?
Yeah.
So here's what I want to do. I want to pause and formulate the questions, and I want to soon get to the next phase of the story, for part 2.
Yeah.
And also to listeners, after that, after I've nailed her down on those travels, and then what she learned, then how she's brought that back to Sweden, and what the classes are that you can attend. For example, I'm going to be following Emelie onto a sacred mountain and talk to the mountain with her.
Yes.
This June 2025, and I think we're full, are we not?
It seems like we're a bit overfull, but you never know.
Well, what I'm thinking is, I think we'll do it again, right?
Yeah.
So those of you who'd like to follow Emelie onto a sacred mountain in Western Sweden, I don't know how you could resist. there will be more. All right. In the meantime, like, how about stuff?
And I'm double checking with everyone who is booked onto this one to make sure that they're coming.
Okay, and if there are any cancellations or whatever, we'll let everybody know. Yeah. But given that we're going to reconvene, people will just from here want to know how they can contact you now. So can you just please give everyone your contact info? Like, how do people?
Yes.
What are the courses, more or less?
We have 2 websites that has quite a lot on them. The reason there is 2 is that because one is related to the sanctuary and the non-profit organization, and one is related to how I also the courses and the classes and the school, because that is taxed differently. So because of the tax department, we have 2.
But if people want to,
interlinear. So one,
if somebody wants to do a course with you.
Yes. Then it is
how the fuck to talk to the mountain, let alone the plants and the horses.
Yes.
What's that website?
That website is miothewayofcompassion.com.
One more time.
MIO, Mio,
MIO, Mio,
the way of compassion.
the way of compassion.
.com.
MIO, the way of compassion.com.
Yes.
Okay. And your email's on there, right?
Yes. Mio was a horse that really put things into practice, how non-hierarchical system can be put into practice. So,
Okay.
and then the non-profit, and where you sort of learn about the sanctuary and storytelling and these things, is friendsofmio.com.
Friends of Mio, MIO.
Yeah.
.com. All right.
Yeah.
Emelie. Man, I can't wait to get there. What an extraordinary human you are. All right. I'm going to go.
Really see how all these things that are in one way really negative and hard, they really also play a part, you know?
Well, sure. And I mean, it's to me what comes across is that the tragedy is not that difficult things happen. The tragedy is that life is not lived as life should be lived.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that deep joy, it just goes back to that image of your grandfather, of your father rather, if he had lived in the authentic human pre-agricultural perhaps way,
Mm-hmm.
imagining him mapping out a stone circle,
Yeah.
with the excited participation of the whole community.
Yes. And the tragedy in that he's one of so many. It's not that it's sort of a few
No, exactly.
that falls out. It's the majority that actually we've managed to create a system where almost no one.
Right. And we're supposed to be not only in relationship to each other, because we're of the planet, we're of the ecosystem, we're supposed to be in constant interspecies relation with about 300, 400 species surrounding us. We're supposed to be in constant relation with, that's just animal species. We're
Yes.
supposed to be in constant relation with our environment, and we're not. And we are grief-stricken, I think. I don't see how it's possible to not be mentally ill. I consider myself mentally ill.
Yes. Yes. No, definitely.
Because of just the reaction to the extreme pain of having to live that way. And I'm lucky. I mean, I was on my horses in the forest earlier today looking at roe deer.
Yeah.
And even with that, there's the limitations that are involved, So, and this thing of non-hierarchical is so interesting, because while it is true that while I'm riding my horse, I actually very much would like them to go the way I need them to go. And, when there's a car coming on the road, not wander out into the middle of the road and get.
Exclude that, because
Exactly.
it's that.
It's that feeling of, okay, do we feel that we both kind of want to do this together?
Exactly.
If we do, then okay, let's work out. Just as if I'm going to follow you up a mountain.
Yeah.
Your gaff, it's your hood. You know that mountain. I'm following you. We've agreed, because it would be just absurd for me to try and lead that mountain because I don't know the mountain. Similarly, if you're walking in my hood on the way to the supermarket, I'll probably show you the way just because I happen to know the way. But
the imbalance of hierarchy comes when we put a different value on it.
exactly. Well, it's deferring to expertise. It's deferring to experience. It's saying, well, okay, I need to learn about this thing. Let's say it's acupuncture. Okay, I don't know from it, and Emelie does, but I'm going to defer to her expertise. That's just common sense. And of course, as people get older, one wants to defer to elders because they know more, and all of that is gone. We put our old people in old people parking, and
I know.
it's just we couldn't get it more wrong. And obviously, many people have said this over the generations. We're not the first, but it is so interesting when you bring it into the focus of a life, and you talk about your grandparents, and even up there on the edge of civilization, which, Sweden is.
Mm-hmm.
There is a point, like Canada, there's a point beyond which it sort of stops.
Mm-hmm.
Even there, well, so I think what I'd like to revisit, okay, in episode 2 is obviously the rest of the story, and then how from your travels you get this sanctuary going and what you do there. And then I promise, listeners, we are going to do a series, a little series on fairies, naiads, dryads, trolls.
Yes.
And we're gonna go down that rabbit hole whole time, and we're gonna do it unashamedly, and we're gonna do it firstly, and I don't give a shit whether or not anyone thinks it's real or not. I couldn't give a flying monkeys, because
No, neither can I.
I want just not to enjoy it. I just want to dance with them. Oh, it's such a relief to me that one can actually have that conversation.
Yes. No, if it was up to what
And
people,
if you think we're away with the
we
fairies,
wouldn't even
listen,
have
you're
begun.
right, we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and we're not hiding it. So go listen to something else. It's like when people want to make animals here more obedient or whatever if they're on a class. It's like, no, you can go to any farm all over the world, and people and animals will do exactly what you want them to do. Now you're in the one place where that's not going to happen. Just don't be here. It's not that hard.
Yeah, and in terms of the, say, functionality, again, like there I am teaching somebody some dressage, or there I am serving an autistic kid on my horse. Yeah, sure, I absolutely need that full buy-in from my equine partner.
Yes.
However, I don't want to be his boss.
No,
I am completely uninterested in being anybody's boss.
and I'm sure he's perfectly happy to be part of that team. A lot easier when you do it together.
One thing that is really interesting with this is I have learned to hear when a horse is saying no. And at first I thought that was not something you would be allowed to respect, or if you did, there'd be this unraveling of everything and
Exactly.
chaos, and people would be killed. And then I was absolutely not. No is not no forever, any more than if you say to me, Rupert, do you want to walk the dog right now? Or Rupert, do you want a cup of tea right now? I might say yes, or I might say no. But if I say no, it doesn't mean I never want a cup of tea. It just means in this particular moment. Right. And to learn to discern in that way. And of course, in the hunter-gathering context, the animals do have that autonomy, but in agriculture, they don't.
Yes, exactly. There's something happening in that shift.
And so, if we can be now able to sort of post-agriculture, be able to bring ourselves back into that relationship, but not only as hunters.
No, exactly.
Or as medicine, but just in interaction. But that doesn't also have to be an extreme thing. Oh, now we're not allowed to ride the horses anymore, even put a bit in their mouth or anything like that. That just all seems to me
it's not that easy.
too extreme.
It's changing your intention. It's not so much changing the outer circumstance as you might first think.
Absolutely. But it's very rare to have a conversation like this in which that type of discernment is made. Usually when one has a conversation like this, it's one extreme or the other extreme.
Yes.
It's so incredibly refreshing, Emelie, to be able to talk about stuff that sounds completely nuts from an absolutely commonsensical point of view, so that then one can get to, well, is it okay to ride my horse, or is it okay to, for us all to be setting these flexible boundaries with each other, species. And I think, where I was at the beginning of this, where I was saying, when people say I'm an animal communicator or whatever, and I'm always so skeptical because it always seems to be personal to that human. It's like, is it really, But what you're saying seems so very different to me.
Yeah, and I think maybe what you are unaware of, or what people are unaware of, is that maybe the actual contact point was real. But the minute my brain picks up on what I'm experiencing, my interpretation starts. And if I'm unaware of that, I will believe in my interpretation. So I will actually think that the horse is really saying that, because my brain is so fast in experiencing everything as real, whether it's true or not.
I was just having a conversation, actually, oddly enough, with another Swedish friend who I'm going to be doing a podcast with, and her autistic daughter, who I've known for many, many years. And Lena, her daughter, Helena is her mother. They live in New York, but they're Swedes. Non-speaking.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people listening will be aware of the current thing going around called the telepathy tapes. I don't know if you've come across those, but
Heard about them.
very, very worth listening to, massively. But basically, yes, people not speaking, it turns out, seeming to be able to do it on a telepathic level. Okay. And then speaking through people they love, parents, trusted, but then realizing that sometimes what as the people pick up and become a filter, then exactly what you said, the interpretation and thoughts of the person who's then the filter begin to cloud what's said, and then what ends up being said might or might not be what the original person was. And people are learning how to navigate this.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That we could do the same with animals.
Definitely.
All right. Well, okay, we better make another date, hadn't we?
Yes.
In that case, I'm gonna hit the end recording button. So listeners, just know this is only the first one. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you did, please help us to make more. Please like, subscribe, tell a friend, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, please go to my website, rupertisaacson.com. And if you'd like to find out about our certification courses with autism, education, horsemanship, everyday shamanism, there's a whole range of cool stuff. Putting a show together like this is not an easy task. If you'd like to support us, please consider going to our Patreon page and showing us some love there. Even the smallest donation, it really helps us to keep the good content coming. So go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. Not to mention our excellent merch. Please go to our shop and check out some of our really cool rock and roll themed merch, t-shirts, hoodies, all that sort of thing. rupertisaacson.com, it's all there. I can't wait for our next guest and also to meet you there. In the meantime, remember, live free, ride free.